House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 2 titled The Rogue Prince just aired, and I absolutely loved it. But before I get into too much detail, this video is going to be full of spoilers. So go watch the episode and then come back and watch this if you for some reason haven't watched it yet. And also, before I get too deep into it, once again, I am a huge Game of Thrones fanatic. I say it in every Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, House of Dragon video that I do. But I say it because I know new people watch this every single time that I upload one. So consider subscribing. I talk about Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon very frequently on this page, so consider subscribing if you want to support a fellow fanatic of a universe that I'm sure you also love if you're watching this video. So this episode takes place 6 months after the events of the first episode, and a lot of stuff is going on. It's a bit tame, but there is one giant climactic huge scene that gave me so much tension that I loved, and I'll talk about that part later. But most of this episode is just sort of dilly-dallying around King's Landing. It focuses heavily on King Viserys and the aftermath of his wife's death and his child's death, and we see a lot of people try to pawn their child off on Viserys. They want him to marry, they want him to remarry because he has to strengthen his bloodline, and they want him to produce an actual legitimate male heir, unlike Rhaenyra, who he claimed to be his heir at the end of episode 1. We get quite a few scenes this episode between Viserys and Alicent Hightower, and I really enjoyed those scenes, and I'm starting to really like Alicent. She's becoming one of my favorite characters, and I'm very curious where she's gonna lie when the shit finally hits the fan, because she seems to genuinely care about Viserys. Now, obviously, her father, Otto, is trying to give her to Viserys as a potential wife, but I don't really know what she feels. I don't know if she sees Viserys as someone she looks at lustfully, someone that she wants to marry someday. In my opinion, she sees him more as like a role model, someone to look up to, someone to relate to, someone to give her history lessons, someone to actually listen to her when she lives in a society that doesn't really care much about what she has to say. And I just really like Alicent and where she's placed amongst everyone. Like, she tells Viserys at one point that he should be the one to approach his daughter, Rhaenyra, and talk to her and see what she's feeling and see her emotions and how she's handling everything. And then after that, we see Alicent talking to Rhaenyra, and she essentially tells Rhaenyra the same thing, that she should approach Viserys and try and talk to him. It's just cool seeing this character who's trying to be a middleman amongst the Targaryen family and try and get everyone to get along. Not that there's much happening to make them dislike each other, but it's just cool seeing Alicent try and be an overall good person. I just hope that she doesn't become a victim of politics and a victim of circumstance and essentially be a pawn placed where all these people of power want her to be, where she essentially loses that kind-hearted innocence. And then Corlys Velaryon tries to offer Viserys his daughter's hand in matrimony, and she's really young and it's really weird, and everyone around Viserys tells him that he should do it. Everyone he confides in, everyone he talks to says, including his own daughter, including Otto Hightower, including, again, just everyone he talks to says that this is a perfect match on paper. She's a Velaryon, she's got Targaryen blood in her, she's from Old Valyria, much like the Targaryens. She's just a perfect person on paper to wed, though Viserys clearly doesn't want to do that because, spoiler alert, I told you there will be spoilers. At the end of this episode, he chooses to marry Alicent Hightower. I'm conflicted about how I feel about this. I feel like Viserys is choosing genuine connection. I feel like he's choosing someone he genuinely likes being around and likes talking to, and he feels like he can connect to you on a different level. But instead of choosing, the politically correct answer and marrying, again, Corlys' daughter. But on the other hand, I really don't think that Alicent wants this too much. I know her father really does, and then obviously his daughter Rhaenyra, who gave him his blessing, by the way. So big props to Rhaenyra. That she's in a world where, being the heir and having the rightful claim to the Iron Throne is incredibly important, but she tells her father she understands he needs to marry, he needs to produce more heirs, though she is clearly not too happy when he chooses her best friend, Alicent. And then a completely different plot line is Daemon takes Dragonstone for himself and he steals a dragon egg, and then Viserys is going to go and confront him, but Sir Otto chooses to confront him himself, the Hand of the King. And this scene, I'm going to be completely honest, it made me like Otto a lot more. I'm not a huge fan of Otto Hightower so far, but I got a lot more respect for him, seeing him don some armor, seeing him have a sword on his side, seeing him go and confront Daemon Targaryen and, lay down the law, stand his ground, say what he feels needs to be said. And it just made me respect Otto, because a lot of Hands of the King, a lot of people that we see who have the title of Hand of the King tend to, be in the small council, give their 2 cents, give some counsel, but aren't really out there doing shit on their own, so to speak. And again, it just made me respect Otto a bit more, seeing him get mud on his boots. And that's the scene that I mentioned earlier. It was so intense seeing these characters argue with each other, seeing these characters draw swords on each other, seeing bloodshed almost be spilt, and then Daemon's dragon comes out and, you know, roars and flaps its wings, and then Rhaenyra shows up on her dragon, and a badass confrontation that again made me respect Rhaenyra so much. She's incredibly underrated by those around her, and I think by the time that this show really gets going, she's going to be one of the best characters in the entire world of Ice and Fire. She's just a badass now. She seems to have good morals. Another plot line that we got in this episode was Corlys Valerian's people are being attacked by this pirate prince person from somewhere in the Free Cities, and he asks Viserys for help to fight them, and Viserys says that he cannot risk war. Westeros has never been at war with the Free Cities, and if that happens, a lot of bloodshed will happen and countless people will die. Which I get his perspective, but I also get Corlys Valerian, you know, wanting justice for all of his people that are being killed and fed to crabs. And it's just one of those great plot lines that I love about Game of Thrones, that I love about the world of Song of Ice and Fire, is that you get everyone's perspective. It's one of those perfect things about this show, is that there's so much conflict, and the conflict is so tense because you understand where everyone is coming from. Like, for example, Daemon Targaryen versus Otto Hightower, and then when Rhaenyra showed up, you got where every single person in that conflict was coming from. And again, I feel the same way about Corlys and Viserys' argument. And then at the end of the episode, Corlys Valerian is obviously very upset with Viserys deciding to marry Alicent Hightower instead of his daughter, so he goes and he invites Daemon Targaryen to his, you know, kingdom, and they talk to each other and they scheme, and it seems like they're gonna become a duo and they're gonna team up to fight the pirates, and as Corlys says, it'll help Daemon prove his worth. But you know, there's gonna be something political going on between the two of them. Whether or not they continue to trust each other or end up conflicting with each other, I don't know, but you know a lot more is going to happen with that plotline, and I can't wait. But yeah, this was another incredibly good episode of House of the Dragon. It's so good to be a fan of A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. Say what you will about Season 7 and Season 8. I personally like them more than the average person, though I feel bad for the people that genuinely did not like it. I really, really do. I sympathize for you loving something for so long, being so invested, and to see it flop and to see it flounder, in your opinion, has to be a really hard thing. And of course I do see the flaws, though. Again, I do like it more than the average person, but it's so good to be a fan of this universe and to get incredibly good, well-written episodes with great characters and great plot lines. It's like we're back. It's like we're back in the peak of Game of Thrones, when it was at its absolute best. I'm not saying it's at the absolute best that Game of Thrones was. Game of Thrones at one point was up here, and I'm not saying House of the Dragon is up there yet, but I'm saying I get that feeling. Like, all week, I talked about the first episode all week to essentially everyone I knew, and I had to wait a week, and it felt like torture waiting for this episode to come out. And I just haven't felt that way about a TV show since Game of Thrones ended, and it just feels so good to be in a universe that I absolutely love yet again. Another side thing I want to talk about, and this is going to sound like I'm critiquing it and giving it a flaw, but I'm not, and that is there's not a real connection between a lot of the characters. Like, when you watch Game of Thrones, you feel a genuine connection between everyone in House Stark, everyone who lived in King's Landing at the time. You can feel whether or not they hate each other or dislike each other. You can feel that there's a realness between everyone. And in House of the Dragon, I don't necessarily feel that yet. Everyone feels a bit sterile. No one feels really connected, so to speak. Like, even the Hand of the King and the King, two people who should technically have a close bond, I don't really feel that close bond as much as I'd like to. But I feel like that's for a narrative reason. That's why I'm saying this is not a complaint. It's just something that I'm noticing. And I feel like that narrative reason is something they touched on in the first episode, is there's been peace for a long time. There's technically no reason for people to really have conflict with each other. There's nothing to constantly argue about. There's nothing to really go to war about. So again, there's no reason for these characters to hate each other. Yet there's no reason for these characters to genuinely love each other, to truly feel like they're family. And I feel like that's a very important thing about this cast of characters so far, because when the shit hits the fan, when war really breaks out, you're gonna know that a lot of these characters, there's not gonna be much love lost between a lot of these people. And I like that personally. Anyway, that's my quick thoughts on Season 1, Episode 2 of House of the Dragon, titled The Rogue Prince. What did you think about this episode? Let me know in the comments. And again, consider subscribing, because I love Game of Thrones, I love A Song of Ice and Fire, I love House of the Dragon. I talk about it frequently. I have a playlist on this page, check it out, but I also do discussions on other TV shows, I do trailer reactions, I talk about video games every now and then, so just consider subscribing if you like this video, if you want more of it, if you want other stuff. Just thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far. Thank you.